Evening, everybody. So my name's Paul Grimley. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I work on Azure landing zones. If any of you know the Microsoft organization, I'm part of the global customer success team, so I help support the cloud solution architects in the field. So Nick was one, John is one, Liam is one, who just presented. So I basically work in the corporate part of these fantastic guys who are out in the field working with customers directly. Twitter handle there and my LinkedIn. My ask to you is, if you do connect with me, please just say you met me tonight, because I get lots of people connect with me and I don't know who they are, and it'd be good to have some context. So please put that in a little comment if you do want to connect with me. So I dug this slide deck out from, I was thinking, when was I last here? Do I still have this slide deck? So it was exactly 2 years ago to this month, I was here presenting on enterprise scale landing zones as it was known then. So I was a cloud solution architect myself at the time, and I was basically here to talk about my experiences from being in the field, as I was previously, on how to deliver enterprise scale landing zones as it was. It got rebranded since then to now. I think it was about a year ago. But it's great to be back, and really coincidental that it's 2 years since I came. And it's actually, I was talking to some colleagues today, some of my Azure Landing Zone colleagues. Azure Landing Zone went GA 3 years ago, June 2020. So it's 3 years old now, so which is a fantastic feat. Agenda for this evening. So when I put this session together, or when I actually reached out to Phil, who's one of the co-coordinators, and said, "Hey Phil, you've got a slot that needs filling. Would love to come back. I don't come as often as I used to. I switched into my new role as a program manager about 18 months ago, so I'm limited in my evenings to be able to come to these, because I'm working with a lot of my American counterparts." But I reached out to Phil and said, "Look, I'd love to come back. I love supporting my local community. I'm from the Birmingham area as well. So great to come and speak to you all and get you here, and it's a fantastic turnout as well. So thank you for coming and spending your evening with me and everyone else here." So agenda, I'm going to talk to you give you a little bit of a CAF Azure Landing Zone overview. So the bottles that you've got, they'll help you remember CAF. If you don't know it, Cloud Adoption Framework. This is the methodology or framework of the methodologies that we have, and I'll talk to you a little bit about where Azure Landing Zone fits there. I want to talk to you about what we've been working on. If I put that in twice, what have we been working on? What are we working on? So just so you're aware, Microsoft works in fiscal years. The fiscal year has just started, so July is the first month of the new fiscal year. So we're in fiscal year 24. So a bit of insight into Microsoft, kind of how that works. So we have a happy new year. We've started our new fiscal year, and at the end and the beginning of the year, we're setting priorities and focus on the months ahead. So if I do talk about fiscal planning and things like that, then refer back to now. This is the start of a new year. And then I just want to talk to you about your input helps as well, and how to contribute. So the success of Azure Landing Zone is a core team, but it's not just the core team. It's individuals like yourselves who can help contribute to Azure Landing Zone and make it a success. And I'll talk to you about some of the ways that you can help and be part of this. And what we're starting to do is surface this more and more in external community calls, which I'll also share the links and information for as well, which you can join, and you'll hear me and my colleagues talk about the latest things that are happening. So what I've done tonight is just try and summarize some of that for you and talk to some of the things that we're doing as well. So bear with me, we're on a journey for 40 minutes. So just before we get started, a quick question for you. So what workloads is Azure Landing Zone suitable for? So HPC, Azure Virtual Desktop, Cloud Native, IaaS workloads. All of them. Good answers. All of the above and more. So I guess what I wanted to kind of call out there is, some of you may be new to Azure Landing Zone. I mean, hands up, anyone first time you've heard of Azure Landing Zone? Is okay. So quite a few of you. Perfect. Okay, that's a good mix. So yeah, I wanted to make sure I set the scene so that when you're sitting here listening to my slides that follow this, you know that this is relevant to you as well. It's not like, it's not a niche part of Azure. This applies to anybody who's using Azure. So if you've got if you're touching Azure in any way, it all comes back to Azure Landing Zone. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of that as well to help some of the half the room, I think, put their hands up for that, to say that they were new to Azure Landing Zone. So I'm going to get you up to speed quickly as I can, and then I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing as well. So, all right. So quick overview of Cloud Adoption Framework. Again, this is going to be a whistle stop. I'm hanging around. I'm not in a rush to get home. So if you've got any questions, feel free to come and see me afterwards. So the Cloud Adoption Framework, it's a suite of methodologies. So effectively, if you think of moving into the cloud, you're new to cloud. Microsoft have built a Cloud Adoption Framework, like a kind of set of steps to get you from kind of the traditional on-premise data center into Azure, the Azure platform. So there's a number of different methodologies there. So you've got defined strategy. So why are you moving to cloud? What's the business plan? What's the value of moving to cloud? Have you made sure in your organization that you understood why you're moving to cloud? So those are some key early discussions that you need to be having at a senior level to make sure that everybody's bought into this, right? It's not something you can try and kind of go from the ground up, like the drains up. So if you're kind of hands on keyboard and you're trying to influence leaders, that's definitely a way to do it. But to have success, you need to define a strategy. What do I want to do? What do we want to achieve? Why is Azure going to be successful for you? Why is public cloud going to be successful for you? So once you've kind of defined where you're going with a strategy, you need to plan. What are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to light up in Azure? What's the first workload you're going to move? Why do you need to move it? Those kind of things. So defining that strategy and plan, a key kind of components of the Cloud Adoption Framework. Then we have Ready. I'm not going to dive into them in detail. You can see them on the screen. Ready, Adopt, Govern, and Manage. So effectively, you kind of go from left to right, and then the ones at the bottom, Govern and Manage, are basically across the board, and that's continued and ongoing. Azure Landing Zone, which we'll come to talk about, is in the ready phase. So you've done the planning. You now need to build. You're ready to kind of build that out. We've ticked all the boxes. We know how it's going to work. We know where we're going to deploy, what regions we're going to deploy to. We know any compliance requirements that we have. So that's been sort of fleshed out in the plan and the strategy kind of definitions. And you're ready to build. So this is where Azure Landing Zone is basically the ability. It's an accelerator. It's a bootstrap. So basically, and again, I'll get into this more, but it basically takes all that information that you've kind of worked on and in the plan and strategy, and it brings it to life for you. It's that kind of getting you from kind of having nothing in Azure very quickly to having a configuration, having networking set up. And the beauty of Azure Landing Zone is the consistency that you have across all our customers, which means that when we hear of issues, challenges, and if you're adopting Azure Landing Zone, then you'll subscribe to us, and you're not going to be a niche deployment. It's going to be a consistent deployment of your Azure solution and architecture. So therefore, it's a common pattern, and that we're trying to advocate for all our customers to follow. If you are already in Azure, and many of our customers were way before Azure Landing Zone was around, then that's fine. You can still align to Azure Landing Zones, and we are investing in aligning documentation as well to help you on that journey. So if you're looking to kind of, you're saying, well, I've been in Azure many years, but I now want to adopt some of the Azure Landing Zone principles. We're building guidance. We do have guidance in Cloud Adoption Framework that covers this as well. So if you search for Azure Cloud Adoption Framework, you'll see a whole raft of documentation. I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of pages there are of documentation. Myself and my colleagues build this documentation to help guide yourselves. It's free of charge. It doesn't cost anything. And it's here to basically, we want to make your journey to Azure as rapid as possible and as frictionless as possible. So this is where Azure Landing Zone comes in to help as part of that to move you forward as quick as possible. All right. Okay. So Azure Landing Zone itself, if you're going to take away what Azure Landing Zone is and placing that in your mind as to what it does for you and how you can kind of going to have a conversation with a colleague or someone you're talking to away from this event, think of a metropolis, a city that you're trying to build, and what do you need to make that city become, a city from nothing, from having fields and derelict land. How do you become a city? What do you need to do? And this is very similar to Azure Landing Zone. So Azure Landing Zone is basically, your fields are Azure. You're not really sure how to kind of make those fields something. Azure Landing Zone is basically building all the infrastructure to allow you to move in your workloads, right? So I think the way I grasp it, it can take a while to kind of understand, well, where does Azure Landing Zone fit and where does the actual workload fit? So think of it that, all the roads that you see outside here, Azure Landing Zone is like building those roads, like the networking that you need to connect back to your on-premise data centers or other public clouds, wherever that may be. It's about defining that infrastructure, but it stops at actually building the building. Okay, so the landing zone, what I'd say is the buildings. That could be a house, it could be a multi-story building. That's not what Azure Landing Zone that I work in platform side. However, just to confuse you a little bit, we do have landing zone accelerators. Landing zone accelerators are for things like SAP, AVD, AVS, all the kind of Microsoft technologies. I have counterpart program managers who solely focus on those landing zone accelerators, again, to take you on this journey. And I have a nice pictorial slide which will talk to you about the journey as well. Nick, question?
Yeah. Explain what you just explained to one of my customers, and I just could not get it across to them. This big distinction between where the workload lives and all the plumbing.
Yeah.
I ended up having to change it to Azure Platform, being the landing zone bit.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't stop that.
I guess it's like shared services is an old way of thinking. The platform is the shared services. Like everybody needs the network, a central network, a LAN to connect to.
Landing zones, which are the things where it works.
And I'm going to touch on vending as well. So that's one of the things I will cover is vending in there.
So many different meanings. Quite hard. Somebody's not used to it.
Yeah. Another one, an easy one, is like a helipad, right? The helipad is the platform that's all the infrastructure that holds the helicopter when it lands, and the helicopter is the workload itself that's coming to land and plug into that. Yeah, there's different analogies that people kind of settle on. So so I built this slide, and I'll give you these slides as well, by the way. I'll share these for you to take away, so don't panic, because there's lots of links coming up I'm going to talk to. Don't worry about taking photos or writing them down. I'll share all these with you, and you'll start to get a theme of how we write these links as well, because they're all short links. So you'll probably figure out, once you get used to the short link way that we work, you'll probably go, have they done that in a short link format? And you might find what we've already done. So, and you'll see what I mean. This will come to you. So there's a helicopter. There's a nice picture to kind of go with what I just said. So yeah, one of the many different things Azure Landing Zone brings, but it's about, so the global customer success team where I sit, one of the key principles of my role is allowing people like John and who are working directly with customers to allow their customers to scale. So product groups will build a product, and they may not necessarily think of the scale element. So they'll go, here's a fantastic new thing we've developed. And then we're the kind of, we kind of get involved, and we go, well, how do we scale that? How do you scale that? How do customers adopt this at scale? So we're kind of like in between partners and customers and the product groups who are building their fantastic products, and we bring it all together. And that's what Azure Landing Zone is. It's the glue that brings lots of different platform products, infrastructure products together, like ExpressRoute, all those kind of things together, to be able to kind of have that kind of architecture. We have it's a baseline. It's a consistent baseline we have. We evolve it, so it's not something 3 years ago we've created and then it stands still. We're always evolving. So as new technologies come out, new products are named, we are constantly evolving Azure Landing Zone. And if you start to kind of get involved and have a look at the repo behind all this, you'll get a feel for the amount of work that goes in here. There's a lot of effort goes in, and we do have a lot of information that we share as we release new information. So you heard me talk about design principles. So Nick kind of hinted to one of them, which is subscription democratization. So many years ago in Microsoft, we had guidance to say put everything in one subscription. And the reason we did that is because we didn't have the controls to be able to have, they used to call it subscription sprawl, where you'd have lots of subscriptions you'd put your resources into. There was no way to govern that at that point. However, we now have the tools to be able to do that at scale. So we have management groups, which I'll show you on a video shortly. We can assign policies to those, so we can enforce policies at scale. Think of it like a folder structure level. So like the C drive, you can enforce a policy at the C drive, and anything below that C drive, any folder, subfolder that comes into play, has to comply with that policy. And if it doesn't, it will get reported on. If it's, there's lots of powerful tools that we can use to reference the compliance that comes from the reporting from Azure Policy. So we're heavily built on governance through Azure Policy. An example that may resonate with you all really well is we talked about in the strategy and planning in CAF. What if there's only like certain regions that you're allowed to deploy to? So you can have a policy that will say you can only deploy to these regions. So that assures senior leadership that they can sleep at night and not have to worry about data leakage into regions that aren't in their kind of in their mandate. So there's many different policies you can have. Don't spin up very expensive VMs, because we all know what happens when you do that. You're going to incur a cost very quickly, and someone's going to have bill shock. So all those things that you can do through policy that will help you control your costs and spend through that central policy engine. So that's a really kind of key driver of part of Azure Landing Zone. So do bear that in mind. And again, subscription democratization ties in with policy-driven governance as well, around allowing lots of subscriptions and then being able to control them without actually having to do anything every time you spin up a new subscription. We obviously drive, and these kind of intertwine a little bit. So single control and management plane, you're using the Azure portal, the APIs to kind of interface to drive all of your kind of needs through a central way to operate. And the next one is the application centric and archetype neutral. So archetypes take a little bit of getting your head around, but it's a definition for your for the workloads that sit underneath it. So the great one we have, which is the standard for Azure Landing Zone, is we have Corp and Online. So these are two management groups where you can put your workloads. Corp means that it's data that you don't want things like public IP addresses attached to any resource within, and that policy sits at the Corp management group and blocks any of those kind of external connectivity tooling to be able to get into that. Whereas Online, you obviously need to share your services online, and therefore that's a little bit more freer for those kind of things. So that's kind of like an archetype design there to think of. And Azure Landing Zone is built on native tooling, so we're always advocates and naturally for our own tooling, so we're driving that. That's not to say that partners can't build on top of this, and we absolutely welcome that as well. Partners are our lifeblood for Microsoft. So, but from a point of view, there's plenty of products that the Azure Landing Zone team inside Microsoft have to continually maintain and work with to keep up to date, and that's a job in itself. So design areas, I'll build that out very quickly. So there's 8 design areas to work through. So you'll see in the ready methodology documentation in CAF, which is a subsection of the CAF documentation, the Cloud Adoption Framework documentation. You've got all these different design areas. So all these design areas require your input. Billing, who's going to pay, right? Every time you create a subscription, which department in your organization is going to pay for that? What agreement have you got to kind of, commercial agreement have you got with Microsoft to keep creating new subscriptions? Identity and access, how are you going to access this information? What Azure AD tenants do you already have in place in your organization? So typically, we found that Office 365, as it was, had lots of had recommendations about having multi-tenant. So you'd have like a dev and a test and a prod Azure AD. So we talk about how you should leverage this in your organization, and I'll touch more on that shortly. Where you put your resources, you heard me talk about locations throughout the world, what region you want to deploy to, and so on and so forth. You can kind of get a feel for these, down to platform and automation and DevOps. So things like the tooling, how are you going to deploy and manage the infrastructure that we are kind of setting up for you? So appreciate some of you at the back may be struggling to see this. I haven't got the Zoom it tool, so apologies. Feel free to come and gather at the front. This is if you go to aka.msalz, that will bring you to a page that has this on, so you can take that away and have a look at your leisure. Ultimately, you heard me. If your eyes, if you can see, you've got. See if I can walk around here without tripping over. So you heard me talk about landing zone management groups. So we've got the landing zone here. This is where you'd put your workloads. In here you've got SAP, Corp, and Online. So that's where you'd apply policies at that management group level. And then hanging off there, here you've got landing zone subscriptions, A1 and A2. And then the platform side here, you've got your identity management connectivity in there that you then have all your kind of central platform related shared services like Active Directory servers, etc. that would go in there. They wouldn't go in this landing zone area. And we have different policies that apply to these management groups as well. And that's how the governance comes together. And we are constantly upgrading, updating, refreshing policies as they come and are authored in Microsoft. So Microsoft Teams Microsoft product groups, I won't confuse you with the teams, the product. Microsoft product group teams, they are responsible for their own policies. So for example, Kubernetes, they have to create their own policies. It's not a central policy team. The policy team create an engine, and then any like creating Word, the application, the Word team create the application, you write the letters, right? Whoever wants to write a letter can write a letter. Same with policy. Azure Landing Zone team, we create our own policies. We've built a whole library of policies that you can consume. Again, all free. There's no cost to this at all. Again, what's the catch? No catch. We just want you to adopt our platform and do it at a quicker speed. And that's why we're here. And we're seeing lots of value in the services that we provide. So how do you deploy? Again, very much of a whistle-stop tour. We have different implementation options. I've kind of learned through the portal experience. I found that a really good way to learn how Azure Landing Zone works. It's visual, and I like to learn visually. Some of you may prefer to kind of dive into the code, and you also may be more of an advocate for, or you want to be on an infrastructure as code pipeline focus, and that's where you look at Terraform and Bicep. So we have 3 different ways of deploying this that we support in Microsoft. Now, again, partners can build on top of this as well and build their own extensions. What we are saying to partners, and again, I'll come to this contributors, help us, right? Come and build centrally, and we'll call you out on the community calls. We'll come and make sure your name is called out. You get something out of this as well. So there's a 2-way exchange there. So you're recognised for your work. That may be great for you for kind of like your internal kudos at work as well. I think that's, I personally would like to be called out if I was doing something. But take away these 3 different options. The portal, again, if you've not used Azure Landing Zone, it's a really good way of visualizing what Azure Landing Zone is, and it will get you to kind of ask those questions. The other thing it's really good at, if you're panicking and thinking, oh, my organization hasn't done plan and strategy, and you need to go and look at that, it will start to drive some of the things you need to think about. What's my IP range in the cloud? How does that look? We didn't think about that. Where are we deploying this? What's the first region we're going to deploy into? All these things start to become questions that you have to go back to the strategy and plan phase to be able to address. Otherwise, you end up kind of staring at the screen going, I don't know this. Obviously, with Terraform and Bicep, you can go back, and with Terraform, you can delete and recreate and all those kind of things. So there's lots more kind of lots of value add in the infrastructure as code space, and it's something we encourage as well. Like I say, portal is great for learning, but if you do the portal implementation, what that means is what happens, you will take a copy of all the policies at the point that you've deployed that day. So what that means is if we go and create, when we create new policies, you will have no connection. You will have no kind of reckoning to those changes, and you'll have to start then subscribing to the repo to understand what policies have changed. So my recommendation is, if you're starting on that journey, invest in infrastructure as code and how and why and the value of that. We've wrote a document about this recently as well. Links in slides to come, because that will help you keep up to date. Otherwise, you end up doing something called drift, and then you end up having to detect that drift and then trying to rein it in and bring it back together. That can cause you technical debt effectively, and you want to try and avoid that if you can. But Portal is great for proof of concepts. or small businesses who just want to get something up and they've got, for example, IAC might take you a little bit of time to kind of skill up, infrastructure as code that is, take you a little bit of time to skill up in Bicep or Terraform. If you don't have that time, but you need to get out of a data center, Portal's a way to go. Just means accept the risk is going to be a bit of unpicking later on to get your kind of infrastructure as code set up to then comply with what you've built. So just a bit of a kind of decision point there and a warning for you to kind of think about. All right, so what we've been working on, so much we've been working on in Azure Landing Zone. This is just kind of recent things I've been working on as well. So updating Azure Landing Zone. So you've just heard me talk about Portal. I can tell you that the reason this come about was I was with a customer when I was in a cloud solution architect role, and I was kind of reaching out to the Azure Landing Zone team as they were then and said, hey, I'm with a customer. When they deploy this, how do they keep up to date? And there was no answer. So I was really passionate about driving this piece of work because we needed answers. How do you get customers back up to kind of, how do you detect drift? How do you know how far away you are from where we are? So we developed some guidance on how you detect where you're at. I've worked with some of you may be familiar with a gentleman named Julian Haywood. He's a CSA in Microsoft in the German subsidiary, and he's created a couple of tools here called AZ GovViz and AZ Advertiser. They're basically around policy and governance and checking your environment for things like orphan disks and things like that. He's created some fantastic tools that help you scan your environment and understand what's currently deployed and any kind of flags. We've worked very closely with Julian, and I'll touch on a few of those things as we go down the list. So if you have got a Portal deployment of Azure Landing Zone, I highly recommend you check out that update documentation. Nick, question from you.
So probably a year ago, I did a Portal thing.
Yeah.
I ran the scripts on Portal, and there was something in GitHub called AZOps.
Yeah.
That sort of did a lot of this inspection and comparison.
Yes.
We decided against using it because we didn't want it on GitHub basically. Because if it was on ADO, we would do one with it.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked at it since, so I just wondered, is that something that still exists, or is it dying away?
It is dying away, yes. It's not supported by the Azure Landing Zone team. It was developed by another team. Yeah. And for everybody else to understand what AZOps is still available. It is for that scenario where you deployed through a portal and you start creating resources. It basically takes a code copy of what you deployed and puts it into a repo. So you could basically take that code, redeploy it to a new tenant, and it would deploy exactly the same again. For lots of various complications and low-level conversations, it was very complex for a start. So if you wanted to use it, we've worked with some enterprise customers using it, and it's hard for them to get their head around. These are really highly skilled individuals who basically rejected it. They just found it too hard to adopt, and therefore they've moved away from it. And therefore, because of those experiences, that's something that we haven't continued the journey on. So our kind of infrastructure as code journey is Bicep and Terraform. Yeah, great question. Yeah, great question. So the second point in the list is Azure Landing Zone policy refresh. So we spent a lot of time recently, so around about November, December, trying to get to play catch up. So for 2 years, Azure Landing Zone was basically, chugging along, and we were seeing a lot of success. And Microsoft is all about success, right? If we don't see people adopting this, Microsoft won't invest in it. So the key here is we saw continued positive adoption of Azure Landing Zone, and that introduces a healthy problem for us because we've got customers who really want to, who are bought into Azure Landing Zone. We need to step up our game as a Azure Landing Zone team. We recognise that. So we've spent from kind of November, December, we've started to develop something called the quarterly policy refresh. So what we've done is we've looked back at all the built-in policies. So you think 2.5 years since Azure Landing Zone was GA'd, that's generally available. Sorry for the acronyms. Generally available. there's a lot of kind of engineering effort that's gone into building and authoring new policies. We've built our own policies that do, some of it does the same as what the built-in teams have done later. That's great because we want you to use built-in. Ours are there as a gap where the product group haven't built an authored a policy, and the Azure Landing Zone team has built one to bridge that gap. The reason the policy, you may ask the question, why didn't the product group just build it? It's a great question. I asked that question myself. The way product teams work is they have a backlog of work that is, very long. And we come along and have a request, it has to go into the queue. Sometimes that's not quick enough for us. So we have kind of stepped in and built these policies ourselves to help accelerate those blockers that we've seen where we're working with John and Nick and others who kind of come to say, hey, we're blocked, we can't move forward. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that you're blocked, we want to unblock you. So that's the reason why we've built policies to help with that feedback that we've had. You heard me talk about AZ GovViz here. Again, it was developed by a colleague of mine, colleague of some of our Microsoft colleagues here, Julian Haywood. I'm now the product manager for managing the backlog that Julian works on. So we both come together every week and we review the pipeline and the feedback from partners and the field, and we build some fantastic things together. Now, the feedback that we had from customers was, yeah, but it's just Julian's tool. So we heard that loud and clear because it sits in Julian's GitHub org, and it's like, that's not a proper Microsoft tool. It's a fantastic tool. It's just so powerful. So what we've done is we now have this in the Azure org. So it's now a first-party GitHub repository that sits under Azure. So that hopefully gives you and customers and partners a bit more confidence that it's under a recognized organization rather than kind of Julian's. No disrespect to Julian, but I can understand where enterprises come from. They say, well, that's not Microsoft, that's just some guy in Microsoft. Totally understand that. So we've basically got that in the Azure GitHub org now. The Azure GovViz tool, we have a special, we've worked with Julian to develop the drift detection feature, and I'll touch on that in a slide coming up. AZ Advertiser, again, another powerful tool. You basically can compare policies. You can compare versions in policies. When product groups release a new policy, what does that look like? There's lots of fantastic things that you can explore there. If you haven't looked at this, please go and look at that. There's a new feature that Julian released on Monday, which is inline compare policy. So basically, it looks at each line of the policy and it tells you what's changed. Gives you that visual representation rather than saying it's changed. Where has it changed? What have they changed? We've now got that visual representation. Really helpful when you're trying to pick out, well, what have they changed? What are the lines? So that's, again, I've got a picture on that. Azure Monitor based on alerts. I've been leading this piece of work. I absolutely love this piece of work because, like many of you, I'm sure, if you're a consultancy or if you're the end customer or a partner, everybody's in this boat. And what basically we've looked at drive here. This is in the last fiscal year, fiscal 23. We kicked this off, so this time last year. The problem statement was that customers, partners don't have a kind of manifest of recommended defaults that they should apply to their environment in a platform sense. So ExpressRoute, how do I know when ExpressRoute's not working? It's Microsoft, it's yours. You should tell me when to do this. I get this. I get that frustration if you're sitting there looking at me now because I'm as passionate about that as you are. There's so many people I've spoken to who went, why have we not done this years ago? I asked myself that same question, and I'm fortunate and I'm proud to be the one who's kind of breaking these boundaries now. We've developed a tool that basically has a set of alert metrics that we recommend that you deploy as part of a base Azure platform deployment. We are going to bootstrap this into the reference implementation, so Terraform, Bicep, and Portal. That is to come. That will be in the next few months. And this is really powerful on two parts. The first part is that manifest. So if you're starting out or you want to improve your posture with observability and using Azure Monitor, we have these kind of central lists. Until I worked on this with colleagues, no one had come up with a central list. What ended up happening is each product group recommended their own little niche metrics, but no one kind of gathered them all into a central location, which helps everybody in this room. We've done that, and I'm proud that we've done that. So that's the first part. The second part is we've built an engine to get this into your environment at scale. So we've taken all those policies, we've taken all those metrics, service health alerts, and we've packaged those into policies, and they're configurable policies that you can deploy. You can choose which ones out of those that you want to deploy. You apply that into your Azure Landing Zone environment or your Azure environment. It doesn't have to be Azure Landing Zone aligned. And we have guidance for brownfield, non-Azure Landing Zone customers. You can go and take these metrics and you can apply them to your Azure environment. All that documentation, there's a blog there that kind of sets all this out for you. It's in preview at the moment, public preview. Again, we're looking to go GA. We need to attach this to Azure Landing Zone. But again, it's not just for Azure Landing Zone, it's for anyone who's using Azure. And worst case, you just need to validate the metrics that you have in your environment. Now, the key is to this solution, consistency. So as you build out a new subscription, every subscription, if there's a resource type that detects the same as what the policy is looking to find, for example, if you're creating a VNet, it'll say, oh, I've detected a VNet. Right, I need a metric against that. And it will basically create a metric for that resource every time a new subscription has spun up. So again, it's about consistency at scale. We've created infrastructure as code guidance. So again, as I talked about, again, going back to the portal experience that Nick mentioned and I talked about with my customer when Azure Landing Zone came GA, there wasn't kind of any guidance to help support why should I go ICE? Why should I go infrastructure as code? Because that sounds like work. I've got to learn Terraform. I've got to learn Bicep. So we've wrote some documentation to introduce you to why you should consider infrastructure as code. Again, it's trying to fill these gaps in conversations that we see that customers, partners, you guys, girls will have that will stop you from moving because you end up kind of going, well, we'll meet next week and talk about that. And that week becomes a month and you keep talking about it because you haven't figured it out. So we're trying to help you shortcut those discussions within your organizations, within your partner to help move that forward. We did a MS Build roundtable. So if you saw MS Build, we recently presented at Build, which was fantastic. So we had a worldwide presence from the team. Really proud. It's the first time Azure Landing Zone had a seat at the table. This is kind of like one of the elite events we have at Microsoft, and Azure Landing Zone is up there. We get mentions by Scott Guthrie now, which is fantastic. So we're getting to see he's calling us out as part of kind of strategy planning, very high up in our organization, which is great. Zero Trust networking guidance. We've released some guidance there to help you with Zero Trust as well. So you probably, if you haven't heard Zero Trust, it's kind of it's a buzzword. It's something it's all about kind of not trusting, making sure you're kind of as secure as possible. So from a networking standpoint, we have some guidance on that now. So make sure you're kind of aligning with there. That will talk to you about the Zero Trust element, and there's more to come. You heard me talk about multi-tenant and Azure Landing Zone. So if you've got multiple Azure AD tenants, we've got some guidance there, some scenarios. And you can look to see if you're aligning to this. If you've got multiple Azure AD tenants, how you should use Azure Landing Zone with multiple tenants, because it becomes more complex. And this document sets out how firstly we recommend a single tenant. So that's the first thing. But if you want to have multi-tenant, we have guidance for that. But we do recommend as a first port of call of going with a single tenant. So that means that you can still put dev environments into the production Azure AD, which sounds strange me saying that, but everything should live under one tenant. Because you can control the dev access, the RBAC rules from within your production environment. But I recognize, and we recognize, that there's needs that you may have to have your own dev, test, prod kind of separation. Recognize that. So we have guidance for that as well. Azure Landing Zone Bicep Accelerator. So the Bicep Accelerator is effectively, again, trying to make it easier for you to adopt infrastructure as code and onboard Bicep as more quickly. So we have an accelerator that we've created to help you kind of stitch that together, so it's a simpler journey for you. Again, with any of these links here that I've put on, or anything that you explore, I'll come to this. Please reach out. Obviously, you saw my connection, my LinkedIn at the beginning, but also we have an issues area, and I'll talk about that shortly. And you can kind of go, I've looked at this, doesn't suit my organisation. I think there's a gap, and we'll go, okay, we'll triage that and we'll have a conversation, or we might jump on a call with you on that. Finally, we are doing much more than this. This is just a kind of little bit of a, some of the things top of mind. We have a what's new page, and we update that every month. So we work on monthly sprints, so calendar month sprints, and every month we may have a release, or we may have new guidance to share, and we'll put updates in there as part of the changes that we make, and we'll talk you through how you would need to do that for your environment. For example, if you're using Terraform and you need to make some changes, we'll talk you through how to do that through the guidance that comes in there as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of visuals now. So this is the Azure Monitor based on alerts. So you can see the management groups in the middle where there's some arrows pointing into. We have lots of different initiatives that basically target different management groups within, based on Azure Landing Zone. But again, to emphasize, you can do this in a non-aligned way as well, and we have guidance on that currently as well. Again, it's in preview. We are going to make some changes as we move to the to the Azure Landing Zone repo. But please do test this. Go and have a look at the guidance, look at the alerts, and start. What I would say is, if your organization or you're a partner and you're looking in this space to kind of mature your offerings to customers, have a look at how this fits in with what your conversation is with a customer and how it can accelerate that. Because if you can minimize that kind of conversation in that first part, there's plenty of other conversations in Azure to have with a customer, and we'd rather you have those kind of last mile conversations than get stuck in the weeds at the beginning. This is an end-to-end journey of Azure Landing Zones. So if we kind of start at the beginning, this is where you kind of you're seeding Azure. You create some subscriptions, either programmatically or manually. Then you do this kind of accelerator. You either do the portal, Terraform, or Bicep. So that's the kind of the helicopter one in the middle, the create platform. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about subbending shortly as well. We have Terraform and Bicep bending. So this is a code way of deploying subscriptions. Now, I can tell you that working very closely with how to get customers or work with customers to get subscriptions, this can get very complex. So the vending process gets teased out when you're trying to do the code. It asks you all these questions like, who's the cost center that's going to pay for this? What tags do you need on the subscription? All of that starts to become surfaced from having this subbending conversation. The beauty of this is that with that process, you basically feed in what you need. The subscription. Do you need it? Is it an extra large subscription? Does it need a VNet? Does it need multiple VNets? And you have that predefined template that basically creates you the end subscription. You hand that over to the application or workload owner, and then as a platform team, the Azure Landing Zone platform team, your job is done. You empower that application team to work in their subscription, and you've got that governance and policies that overarch that will keep that safe. They're not going to spend lots of money because you've told them not to use expensive machines, or they can't use public IP addresses. So they can do what they like, but you've already got a mandate above that will stop them doing things as an organization you don't want them to do. Finally, the deploy workloads. You heard me talk about the landing zone accelerators. There's many down here: APIM, SAP, Kubernetes, AVS. There's a whole suite of them there. So that will get you onto the workload specific deployments as well. Very conscious of time. Subscription vending I touched on. So this is just to give you a flavor of the sort of things. So management groups. So we'll create that structure for you. All the virtual networking. Virtual networking is the sticky one in conversations. It's always the one you need to get going early as possible. What's my IP range? How's that going to? How many IP addresses am I going to have? How do I carve that up per subscription? All those conversations start coming out in these kind of areas. Again, down to resource locks, role assignments, and tagging, as you heard me talk about as you on board. Nick?
CSP customer?
Yeah.
Can't create a subscription automatically, so the customer has to go into the portal of CSP.
Yeah.
Create a subscription. ID.
Yeah, there are some limits. Yeah, unfortunately, we can't solve everything, but yeah, I mean, those are the sort of things that great feedback. I know Jack is away. Sorry, question.
So, get this right.
Yeah.
This right. Because I'm in the problem right now.
Okay.
How do you maintain? So, for example, you create your VNet, you create your energy, you create your URL, everything, right? And I'm using Terraform.
Yeah.
Right. So once that is done, and then you have to maintain the NSGs, the UDR.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Terraform.
Because you're going to use Terraform to override it.
No, modify. Change. Yeah.
We update the team.
and it doesn't do that. So the way I have been doing it, right, you deploy the whole thing, and I use Terraform, right? When you run the code again, create all the VNet peering and everything,
Mhm.
it will have some objections over there because not everything will code itself end to end. We have those problems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a low-level Terraform guy, but from my understanding, that shouldn't happen. You should be able to update as
long as nobody's made a change on the portal, it won't do it. We've done this from scratch, zero problems with the VNets. The key thing is make sure people are not making manual changes.
No, that is a fact. But you know what happens is your MSGs and everything that goes through. Invariably, you will have something which will be done in the first iteration, and then something will be modified within the Terraform within the same iteration that follows. We'll go ahead and do some changes. It does it. I've seen that happen.
Yeah, I think
I know what you're on about.
Yeah.
There's a bug with NSGs and subnets. If you just, I can't remember off the top of my head, if you do on the same thing twice, it loops. So you're talking about if you run the code 3 times, it go set 1, set 2, set 1 again.
Yeah.
That's bug with Terraform, not this.
Yeah, so that's how we manage that. I get this, right? Then when we deploy it, it's all working.
if it's specific to networking, let's take that offline, and we can add to that. We work very closely with HashiCorp, so we can kind of raise that. But I'm sure that's been raised already. It's where it is in their cycle, but yeah, definitely let's connect on that.
Could I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Back. So we've come from obviously previous being creative, and you've got a little bit there about role assignments. Is there any specific recommendations around our background? Because when we started on this journey, it was a blank piece of paper.
Recommend that's a bit of a broad question. What do you mean?
All of this is good for carving it up to give people distributions.
Yeah.
To go, you put your workload here, you put your workload there.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of Azure roles. Is there anything you assign by default that comes in? So you say, you know,
So that's where the vending would come in, and I think you'd inject into the vending the RBAC model that you want to apply.
Right, so it's still going to the customer.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things recommended is PIM as well. So if you go in privilege, so for the portal, stop people going into the portal unless it's like an emergency and if someone needs to quickly do something, otherwise it's broken and we can't fix it. But you know, when you move into the infrastructure as code, to Darren's point, if you start meddling in the portal, it then you start having your own kind of ghost Azure kind of deployment that the code doesn't know about. And that's one thing that, you know, that's where kind of locking down the portal then really helps in that infrastructure as code deployment. Yeah. Let me quickly skip through this. Right, so this is update your landing zones. This is the cloud adoption framework pages that we have. So, you know, why should you update? I've been to customers and I said, we're doing lots of policy updates, and they kind of shrug their shoulders and go, so what? And I'm trying to say, no, you really need to kind of listen, because there's some security enhancements that you want to take on board. So we wrote some guidance to help that exact scenario, to say, hey, look, this is why you should update. This is kind of in black and white now on the page. And then what we've done, so the Azure Landing Zone team, where you heard me talk about custom policies that we've made to bridge the gap with product groups, where product groups have created their own built-in, which is what we want you to end up consuming, then we've created guidance to say, hey, look, we're going to deprecate our Azure Landing Zone policy, and we're going to point you at the new one, and we're going to recommend you do that. Now, to keep up to date, you need to watch your drift detection. With infrastructure as code, we release new modules for Bicep and Terraform, so you'll see it through that portal. That's where the AZ GovViz tool comes in, and it helps you understand the policies. Because what will happen in AZ GovViz, it will say, oh, Azure Landing Zone team have deprecated that, but here's the one that's replaced it. And that will help inform you and save you that scratching of your head weeks later. So to kind of quick story, 3 years ago when I was deploying this with a customer, I was trying to work out why policy wasn't taking effect. And the Azure Landing Zone team had made an update 2 days after I deployed, and it fixed the problem. We spent a day trying to figure out, and they said, oh, we fixed that. Now, if I had that AZ GovViz tooling, I'd have figured out, or I knew where it was in the repo, I could have sifted it out. So I'm basically avoiding that pain for everybody else now, and I'm passionate about that. This is the GovViz policy checker. Again, I'll leave you the slides. basically there's an option in there, and it will tell you outdated. You can see the yellow very, very quickly. That will just say that there's lots of, that's outdated, and you need to update the policy. And we've got guidance on how to do that in the repo as well. This is the inline comparison that just got released on Monday. So this is where there's a version of a policy, and you can kind of see the changes that have been made as well. So it helps visualize it, makes it easier for you. Right, I'll quickly run through this. We heard some feedback from open source member who said, hey, as a Landing Zone team, you're not being very transparent with what you're doing, and we want to contribute. We don't actually know what we're doing, so we can't contribute. We're like, yeah, fair point. Again, it's all part of us maturing as a team. We now have a roadmap publicly that we've built out that you can access, and that talks about some of the things that we're looking at, some things that we may have parked. So check that out. Lots happening in Azure Monitor. There's a lot happening in Microsoft with Azure Monitor. So diagnostic settings, we're building lots of policies in the built-in space now for lots of Azure services. If you're familiar with the Microsoft Azure Monitor agent, the legacy agent, that's deprecating next August. The AMA agent is replacing it. The reason Azure Landing Zone hasn't adopted it, and we've got an FAQ on this, is because there's not parity. There's not GA in the services in AMA that there is in MMA, and until that is the case, we are reluctant to move to it. And we've told the Monitor team, I meet with them weekly and tell them we need to work on how we get there. That is coming though. They are doing lots of updates in July, or this month now. So we will see a change there shortly. Based on alerts, we'll go GA as you heard me talk about earlier. Policy refresh will continue. We work with lots of customers who are building their own policies, and we're like, hey, everyone could benefit from those. We'll bring them into our Azure Landing Zone repo so that everybody gets to the value of them. We are constantly working with product teams. There's many product teams we have to touch base with. BCDR around site recovery services, Azure Backup. We're constantly working with them to understand what they're doing and how we then need to absorb that into what we're doing in a timely fashion, which you can imagine is quite a large job, especially when you're halfway around the world on a different time zone and you're trying to find time in diaries to connect. On the Terraform space, we're doing some refactoring. So we've heard back from customers about it being too monolithic, and we're trying to break that out into separate modules to make it easier to deploy, and you can just pick different modules. And we're building an accelerator. You heard me talk about the Bicep accelerator. We're doing one for Terraform as well. We heard feedback from the build session that the end-to-end documentation for Azure Landing Zone needs to be improved. We're going to look at that this year. There's lots of documentation. There's so much documentation there. It's not a quick fix. There's so much we talk about. Each page we have to try and find out a hyperlink that fits to the next one and how that process works. There's hundreds of documentation items, and we need to technically validate that as well. So that's a big piece of work. The other thing we heard from Build was application landing zone templates. So where you heard me talk about subscription bending, this talks about giving you examples for how to build certain applications within your blended subscriptions, so that we don't just leave you with an empty shell. There's a bit of a kind of a framework to build off. Right, I think I'm nearly there. How can you help? So we have a public repo. We're open source. Raise issues in the repo, so you can see the short link there. There's some screenshots there where we've got active kind of discussions. We typically respond within the day. So if you're deploying this or you've got a problem, we've got a very active team. We want to hear your feedback. If you don't like it, that's fine. Tell us why you don't like it. What do we need to fix? We have a very healthy open list of things that we're very transparent about, and we're very grateful for the feedback because it helps us improve, and it helps everybody else have a better experience. So we are open source. We're very transparent, and you'll hear that through the call I'll come on to in a minute. Contributors guide. We talk about how you can contribute. So how do you fork our repo? How do you do a PR into, if you're familiar with GitHub, that is, how do you do a PR into our repo? How do you change a policy? How do you recommend a change? And we will triage that and look at it and give you some feedback on that and work with you on that as well. If you want to hear about notifications, events, there's a link here. You can sign up and be added to a mailing list. So we've only just started this, but in a space of days, we've had a fantastic adoption of this. So sign up, we'll send you an email when there's something that we've got to share, or we're asking for help, right? We might say, hey, we think this is a great idea. What do you think? Because if you don't think it's a great idea, we're not going to spend our time doing it, and we need your help. So we'll use that to kind of, bring the community together and get your help on that. So yeah, and there's an opt-out as well for obviously your GDPR. So if you want to kind of remove yourself, all of that's in there as well. So our next community call, external, is on the 25th of September. We publish it through an issue. We pin that issue. So if you go to the repo in the issues, it'll be one of the top ones in there. It has all the details of our call. It has all the links to register, etc. in there as well. And we also have previous recordings in the ALZ community link at the bottom as well. I'm 10 minutes over, I apologise, but I am here if you've got any questions, but thank you for listening, everyone.
You said you're going to just read slides. There's a lot of interesting things here.
Yeah, I'll pass them to Nick. Nick, how do you publish them? I remember giving you last time, didn't I? And I'll do that in the next, maybe tomorrow morning. I'll get them up for you at the latest. So yeah, there is a lot of links.
Different Azure landing zone and cloud landing zone. I'm asking in context because at the beginning you just said that you developed cloud adoption framework. So what will be the difference with Azure adoption framework?
So CAF is the methodology. So it's all the methodologies that you saw me talk about, like plan, strategy, ready. So that's guidance. It's a mix of guidance, tooling to help you. So there might be an assessment in there. You can.
So it's a meta.
It's what? Sorry.
Meta.
Yeah, effectively. So yeah, so it's about the kind of the kind of business decision. So the early part of the CAF is about business decisions and how you move to cloud, and then Azure Landing Zone is more that technical focus. It's about the how, the technical vehicle to get you there. So it's more involved in the hands-on, whereas other parts of CAF are more about kind of strategy and paper-based exercises to help you answer the questions that get Azure Landing Zone deployed.
Do you have tools which can help us to take a decision which cloud is better, just to in concrete?
It's a non-starter, Azure.
Yeah.
There you go. Just phone me up, I'll tell you the answer straight away.
Okay, yeah.
Fantastic for customers that have just started on the journey.
Yeah.
Rewind to where we are. Like you say, single subscription we had to, problem licensing. How much of this can be layered on top of the deployment from say 4 or 5 years ago?
So
What value could be driven?
we do have guidance today on how to do that. So there is a line guidance. It might even be aka.ms/ALG/align. I think it is. And that will go to a CAF document, and it will talk you through how you can introduce Azure Landing Zone into a brownfield scenario. Again, we are going to do more around deeper align kind of documents. We have a backlog of 3 or 4 different things that we want to kind of do deeper guidance on. But there is guidance there. Have a look at it, and ping me if you want to have a chat. But yeah, there's definitely guidance there. We'll talk to you about how you can do it. But ultimately, the cheat to it, to kind of give you the summary, is that you build it side by side. So you deploy it to the same tenant. It has a management group over here. You have all your resources here, and then we talk about how you move them into that landing zone and things to consider, like policy. How do you test? Because once you move it in and the policies take effect, you'll start to get loads of compliance flags to say, hold on a minute, you've got a public IP address and things like that. Yeah, and that we do touch on that. We do touch on that, but yeah, have a look and ping me.
Management groups part,
Yeah.
so we did all of that in parallel, that's what said. But we rebuilt the virtual network and then
Rehoused it.
converted in everything into DevOps pipeline. Then
That would be a great session, rather than, Nick, that might be a really good session to talk about how to do a move, or how, because, the many customers are going to be in that scenario of brownfield. Yeah. Not an uncommon ask from customers, because they love what we're doing. They just can't do it overnight. You do need to go through a testing process to take your workload. Make sure you don't block an RDP port. And you're like, hold on a minute, I used to be able to RDP to that. How do I get to my server? Things like that. Those trivial things that will kind of, hit bumps in the road. All right. Think we're good? Run out of questions? Thanks, everyone. Thank you.